Well, Matt Nannis, welcome back.
Thank you, John Tobias.
We'll try it again.
Yeah.
For viewers, this is not going to be, I mean, the welcome back doesn't really apply. They don't know. So we tried this before, and my technological ineptitude, I think, got the best of us.
User error happens all the time.
Yep. So, so I gave that episode to Cassidy, and she said, "John, have you watched it through?" I said, "No." She said, "There's only about 42 minutes, and it seems like there was, much more, and it just kind of cut off in the middle of, a sentence." And I went, "Oh, yeah, that wasn't on purpose."
Yeah.
So
that's not your directing style.
Very abrupt. Yeah.
You got to keep people wanting more.
That's it. You know how it is. Keep them coming back.
Mm-hmm.
So you're very gracious to be able to come back and chop it up again.
Well, that's a word that's often thrown around with me.
Chopping it up, or gracious.
Grace and grace.
Grace. Yeah. Right.
No, happy to.
Good. And as I was just saying, I think instead of starting in the past and kind of how you worked your way into what you're doing right now, I think I want to kind of go in reverse order and give you plenty of opportunity now to talk about what you're doing, what pivot point is, how you do it, how you think about it. Like, to me, that's probably, the most interesting, is just like how you think about what you do and maybe the whys behind what you do. And then we'll see how far back we get from there.
Sure.
Just kind of what led you to doing what you're doing. But how's that sound?
Yeah, works for me.
Okay. Do you, or will you, give kind of an explanation of pivot point and what you're doing, and why you're doing it, why it feels good to you to be doing what you're doing, what the challenges are?
Sure.
There's a lot in there. So
yeah.
pick whatever avenue you want in that big cluster that I just gave you.
Yeah. And the goal is to beat 42 minutes and not get cut off mid-sentence. So I think really this is it's an experiential program. It was born from a rudimentary, if not lack of understanding of what traditional wilderness therapy and adventure therapy are. But through the strength of observation of the effectiveness of peers that I had seen coming through that intervention.
Through wilderness-based,
more traditional wilderness, immersive and or nomadic and base camp style
traditional wilderness therapy
programming. And in this community in Asheville, North Carolina, and its surroundings, there were at the time plenty, right?
And pretty prominent in this area.
So we can kind of reverse engineer how we got to where we are today, but today we provide day programming anywhere from 4 to 6.5, sometimes 7 or 8, depending on the location of the experiential intervention that we utilize. But we provide experiential coaching essentially for small groups of individuals with low to moderate degrees of challenges around mental health, behavioral health, and substance use.
Can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
So experiential coaching, but is it safe to say, or how would you portray it, like nature-based or wilderness-based experiential coaching?
Nature-based. It's interesting. One of the first mentors I had around shifting, this used to be a for-profit, and I reorganized as a nonprofit. And during that process, one of my coaches has a program in DeKalb County in Illinois. And she defined, I was like looking up where her program was located. And I was like, you're not near wilderness.
Not a whole lot of woods.
And she was like, well, we define wilderness as sort of the raw, unexplored, unanticipated, and undiscovered landscape.
Okay.
So for them and their programming, at least at the time, it was like this internal landscape.
Gotcha.
Which I loved at the time and continue to really embrace, because it's about having a positive impact and being an active and intentional participant in the mechanism of change through a healthier sense of self, a healthier relationship to self. And as a result, kind of leveraging that into how I show up with my peers, how I show up with my kind of micro community and then community at large.
Mm-hmm.
So it is day programming that is experiential in nature. I'll be good for the next hour, but I can't really sit in a chair in a room inside, even with the weather that's going on outside, for an extended period of time and stay focused, let alone engaged. Um, what it ends up becoming for me is rote memorization, and an avenue towards, even if it's really fascinating, applicable information, it's my brain and my process is like, well, okay, I can repeat this, I can regurgitate it, I can parrot what I'm seeing if it's being just demonstrated to me. But there's a missed opportunity for my process to unfold it into how I live my life moving forward. So once I leave this room, what you're going to give me, it might stay up here, but there's a very little chance I'm going to put it into practice
Mm-hmm.
in any conceivable, tangible way. So the creation of Pivot Point and the reason that we do day programming is so that we can review the theoretical, hypothetical scenarios and case studies that are found in more traditional settings. We can do so in an environment where there are, frankly, more distractions, more dynamic settings, so that I have to also be very conscious of my position in the world. I have to orient myself with the people who are physically around me, not just my assumptions of what they might be thinking about me in a formal, like, classroom type setting. And then you go home at the end of the day, which is my favorite part, because now it's like, cool, instead of write an essay describing how you set and maintain boundaries in this fictional setting, it becomes, you're going to go home and your brother's going to be on the Xbox, even though he knows you only have an hour to play Xbox. We just did 5 skills around boundary setting and maintenance.
Yeah.
Do it.
Yeah.
And maybe it works great. Maybe it blows up in your face. More likely, maybe you don't even try it.
Yeah.
Either way, when we get back together next week, we can unpack that. We can talk about that.
Yeah.
It's a tangible, applicable, use the proof of your own personal experience to practice these skills where you find yourself today.
Gotcha. So day programming where they're learning skills,
Sure.
skills that are hopefully applicable to their day-to-day lives. They can go home and use them if they need them. Maybe a better word is when they need them.
Mm.
Now, like I've got in my mind what I think Pivot Point is, and it seems to me that there's a nature-based element to it. So my question is, like, where is this happening? Is this happening like in an office, or is it out on the
Sure.
trail, or what is
Yeah.
the, you mentioned environment? Where is this
What is the
programming?
environment?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's valid. So we have priority use permits to use Pisgah Ranger District, DuPont State Forest. We're in the woods.
Gotcha.
As a nonprofit, we can use conservation land without violating any easements. What we do is we pick up students primarily. A lot of our work right now is with the high school age students.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a contract with Buncombe County's Department of Juvenile Justice, as an example, where for 10 consecutive Saturdays, we will meet at a agreed upon location. We can do door-to-door transportation when necessary, and we'll all meet. We'll do a little orientation, a little front loading on a hike or a rock climbing event, sometimes paddle boarding. Sometimes if we have enough time and enough buy-in from the clients, everything is challenged by choice. We'll go out to the NOC. We'll go down, well, not the NOC, but down the Nantahala through an outfitter out there, and we'll go whitewater rafting, and then we'll bring you back to that same pickup spot at the end of the day. Now, what we're doing in the woods or on the river or on the single track if we're mountain biking, or on the rock if we're climbing it, is we're engaging in a lot of the similar, if not parallel, processing groups that one would in a more traditional kind of mental health support environment. So we're talking about personal agency development,
Yeah.
core values, core beliefs, even some kind of choice point theory, but on a kind of top level, right? Like, we're not really diving in. We're not a clinical program. We're
Mm-hmm.
not processing trauma.
Yeah.
We are identifying, when it comes up, the experience of feeling somewhat activated.
Mm-hmm.
And through the process of experiential education, we are navigating ways to self-regulate, come back to center, and then might even formally say, like, hey, if you like, John, I couldn't help but notice that you felt a little activated in this exercise that we did, and we were able to kind of help co-regulate together. This might be something worth bringing up with your therapist.
Yeah. That's what I was just going to ask. How do these adolescents typically have therapists, or is it a matter of they need one and you refer them, or
So it all depends on how they're coming in. So if it's a diversion contract, which is an agreement with Buncombe County, we get referred through their court counselor,
okay?
right? We can also get referred directly from a school, if they're deemed at risk of what
Mm-hmm.
would require a diversion contract. That involves a referral paperwork that has a risk assessment involved in it. We have intake limitations. We are not, and are very clear with everybody out of the gate and throughout working with anybody, that we're not crisis care. We
Mm-hmm.
are not primary care. We can offer prevention based work, and we can offer a pretty wide range of aftercare on the continuation of care. But we are not the intervention for stabilization.
Yeah.
So as a result of those conversations, both with the student themselves, their family or guardian, as well as the referring agency, we can sort of unpack what the student's coming in with, which usually involves a very rudimentary assessment, not a comprehensive clinical assessment.
Yeah.
And based on what comes up in that paperwork, as well as like an hour and a half to 2 hour interview with the student and their family, we can request and then refer to. Buncombe County has within its diversion program a youth restorative justice clinical assessment program. We can utilize professionals that we know in the mental health community, being here over a decade,
Yeah.
to connect them with those services. We, as a nonprofit, can utilize and leverage funds to help offset or subsidize that in the event that our clients can't financially afford that type of service. Ideally
Oh.
and usually, we can utilize the Buncombe County Diversion Clinical Assessment Team.
Okay.
So there are times where there are some kids who haven't really been making any more challenging or questionable decisions than most people their age, right?
Yeah.
They maybe just got
They
caught.
got caught. Right.
So there are ways there where we do feel, after processing with our board of directors and our leadership team, where there's like 7.5 decades of traditional clinical experience and wilderness-based experience and macro social work experience, we can assess if it is appropriate and safe for everybody involved for us to be the sole support for this particular student.
Yeah.
And when we feel it is not, we don't turn them away. We just put a pause on enrolling them and onboarding them into the program until additional supports are in place. And then
Yeah.
we have a lot of experience communicating on a weekly basis with a traditional talk therapist. If they're living maybe in like youth villages as like a respite, like to be out of the environment where they find themselves originally, we can communicate with that caseworker and that case manager. So we really are, from pickup to drop off, and then in the woods, on the trail, on the mountain, on the river,
Yeah.
really dialed in. And as a result, it's we know immediately when this student or this adult, depending on the program, would really benefit from either an altogether higher level of care because there's a degree of acuity that we're just not trained to safely support,
Yeah.
or additional supports that we can then work in concert with to provide a nice wraparound support.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Um, you mentioned adult,
Yeah.
and I know for quite a long time you were trying to get like a young adult program off the ground,
Yeah.
right? You and I haven't talked about that in a while, and you haven't mentioned it. So what's the current status of that?
Of that program,
Yeah.
it is revisited and polished and dusted from the shelf and then placed back on the shelf. So We of late, through the diversion program I just mentioned, we started in January of this year an after school experiential prevention program. So the whole purpose of that was to take the juvenile justice diversion program and go upstream and work with these kids before they even know what the heck a court counselor is.
Yeah, right,
Um,
right.
and it's been great. And it's gotten a lot of positive response from Buncombe County Student Services, from the students and families themselves. The students are recruiting their peers, walking into their the social workers at the school and being like, "Hey, can so and so get on the next cohort?" Like doing our work for us to raise awareness about the program.
They're enjoying
They love it.
themselves. Yeah,
They love it. It's an opportunity. It's a slightly condensed program because it's after school, right? So
yeah,
we have daylight hours to contend with.
right,
This time of year, not so much,
right.
but over the course of the whole year. And we're still providing those same group facilitation based outings, interpersonal skill building, intrapersonal skill building. And we're giving 15-year-olds and 16-year-olds and 14-year-olds permission to be their age, right? So
Yeah,
like we're gonna do all this work. We're also gonna hike a 2.5 mile loop that just happens to end with a rope swing, and we've got lifeguards on staff. So we're gonna utilize what we have in the natural environment. We're gonna move our bodies. We're gonna try and get back into our bodies and out of our heads.
mm-hmm,
We're going to do that through movement,
mm-hmm.
and a lot of the work that we do with the teenagers in particular is anchored in like us showing up exactly when we say we're going to, if not earlier, every single time. Pretty much across the board with unconditional positive regard. And even when there are consequences based on behaviors and decisions, it's still unconditional positive
Sure,
regard.
sure.
We have the opportunity to be one of the most stable, not always, sometimes there's plenty of stability at home, but we have the opportunity to be another model of an adult stable figure outside of the family, which I think you can agree, especially at this age of development, is really powerful.
Yeah,
To know that I can branch out outside of the two or one or three, whatever the family dynamic looks like, options that I've been presented with and grown up with.
yeah,
So we
yeah,
get to be that person for a group of anywhere from 6 to 10 kids at a time,
yeah.
while we've had some pretty heavy scenarios with even with the prevention program with some of the best friends, a best friend group of a student who completed suicide,
Mm.
and the school counselors had asked us if they could enroll in our program, and we had a couple of back and forths to make sure that we were not being presented as grief counseling,
Yeah,
right?
right, right.
And as long as those other supports were in place, we thought that we would be a perfect supplement to that kind of processing opportunity. And we've got kids who are feeling some kind of way about, they're in AP exams and they're freaking out about not doing well on the AP exam. And the grief or acknowledgement of the loss of their best friend is like not even secondary to them right
Yeah,
now. It's
right.
tertiary at best.
Yeah,
And they're all concerned about like, well, what will my parents think if, and I don't know, and like, what if I don't, like, I got to get into this college because, and we're not denying that any of that is important, nor are we inferring or implying that maybe you need to reprioritize things. But for the next 4 hours every Wednesday for the next 10 weeks, let's just get a little muddy
sure.
and go for a swim in this lake and just relax. Let's just get back into our bodies
Mm-hmm,
and calm the heck down. And then
mm-hmm,
we can do some intentional conversations around like, oh, I felt calm. Where did you feel calm? Or it's
mm-hmm.
nice to not be in my head all the time. Well, where do you go when you're not in your head?
Yeah,
So there's just constant opportunities for curiosity, which I think is very scary for a lot of people because there isn't a definitive answer there. Um, and there's this preconceived, like kind of prepackaged linear track I got to go on.
yeah.
And I can change my mind, but that just means I'm shifting to another track,
Right.
which is
A
already
little
also
different
set out
linear
for me.
track. Yeah,
So we try and provide an opportunity to get a little dirty, and to get real curious about what's going on. And like, well, okay, 6 weeks in, I've identified all my core values and beliefs. So then week 7, my first question is, but are they yours?
yeah. You sure they're
You know,
yours?
and if you don't know, that's cool.
Yep.
Let's work with that.
Absolutely.
So it's yeah, I think that pretty much sums up what we're doing with the kids and the feedback from the community with this age group and with these specific programs is why we're focused on that right now. So the young adult program that you and I had discussed in the past, it still exists. We partner with structured sober homes in the community. We share clients that would be living there when they're not with us in the woods. I keep regular tabs and check in with the leadership of those programs to make sure that everything's copacetic. And if and when we were to re-engage with enrollment with that program, we would be good to go and set up for success. But for now, I mean, there's 25,000 students in Buncombe County.
Yeah.
Not all of them are of the age for our program,
Yeah.
but if you're in 8th grade through the end of senior year in high school, that's a lot of kids.
Seems like plenty of potential work for you. Yeah.
So that's been the main focus.
Do you, and maybe I'm steering you in a direction you don't want to go, but and I ask because to, as long as I've known you, which is maybe 4 or 5 years now, when we've talked, with the exception of maybe the last couple of times, it's always been about the young adult program and trying to get cohorts together and get that. I don't know if this is a fair way to put it, but off the ground. And I mean, it sounds like it's off the ground, but it sounds like it doesn't take. I mean, it's
stalled. Yeah.
Yeah, it's stalled. Maybe
sure.
That's yeah. Do you? And my perception is that you put quite a bit of energy into that between like marketing and like I would see at conferences and you and I talked a lot about that. Do you, like, sitting here now, do you have thoughts about how that went or why it stalled, or like how do you think about that?
Do I have thoughts about it? Sure. Yeah, I do. I mean, I think the time in which I created it, it was in response to feedback that I had gotten over the previous year and a half, maybe more, from families, from referring sources, from kind of aftercare planners, from primary programs. And I felt really confident that we had successfully created a program that addressed some pain points in the research that I had done. What I never really anticipated, we're a tiny nonprofit, right? So and I speak with other tiny nonprofits, and they will casually mention having a staff of 12 or 15. I have 2 salaried people on my staff.
Yeah.
I'm one of them.
Yeah, right.
So there's an issue of there was an unanticipated issue in spite of feedback from the board and other folks of just the amount of bandwidth it would take
to get it off the
to
ground,
travel and notify people of
and
the service, as well as like the amount of potential client education on how nuanced it was and why it was addressing all the growth pain points that I had observed.
Yeah.
And then within that timeline, there were also just a number of systemic scenarios that were unanticipated, or at least the impact of them. There's
societal.
I think that there's some challenges within the world in which Pivot Point is perceived to be adjacent, right? So
wilderness therapy
and working with, also having, while talking about this young adult program, we also had, like, we're in our 4th year of working with the diversion programming, which is adolescents, which are teenagers, which Google search takes you right to troubled teen. I had a conversation this morning from a funder for this preventative-based after-school program, because we want to continue to offer this at zero cost to the students and the families and the school. And I thought it was going to be a budget conversation, and it wasn't. It was like, hey, some of our board of trustees had a few questions about, I don't know if you're familiar with this situation and some of the feedback and pushback, and there's this episode on Netflix, and
like around wilderness, the controversy around wilderness therapy.
Sure.
Gotcha.
And it's interesting because in the beginning, including when you and I began talking about this program, in the beginning there was a desire, a lot of ego on my part fed into this, but there was a desire to get as close as I could to an established industry to legitimize what I was doing.
Right. Right.
And then I would end up spending the majority of my time talking to a family, kind of backpedaling. Like, we're really close to this, which you know and love, and here's all the ways we're different.
But we're not it. Yeah,
Right.
we're different in ways.
So
Yeah.
now, and for the last good bit, we've gotten real clear on like, no, we're not wilderness therapy adjacent. We're not a wilderness therapy alternative. In fact, most of the adolescents who would be referred to us that require a higher level of care are proof that we're not wilderness therapy adjacent, because if we were, then we probably could
keep
provide them. Yeah,
right.
We could provide them with support. So there were a lot of unanticipated shifts in perception, in optics, and in awareness of practices, like across the board practices that frankly I think need to be tightened up.
Yeah.
So as we got clearer on this is day programming, this is experiential education and or coaching, we have the clinical background of our leadership and board of directors to make really informed decisions about safety for clients and appropriateness for our programming.
Mm-hmm.
And we aren't an alternative to wilderness therapy. We are, maybe I would maintain, still an alternative to folks who are, I'm going to say, cast into wilderness therapy enrollment that likely aren't what I perceive to be the ideal.
Didn't necessarily need.
Yeah.
I
think it's become a bit of a catch-all, and I think that we can step in and offer support that utilizes a lot of that meaning making and experiential learning, and mitigated risk, challenge by choice opportunities. But you get to go home at the end of the day.
Yeah.
You sleep in your bed.
Yeah.
You take a hot shower and eat dinner with whomever you eat dinner with.
Yep.
Right. So
yeah.
So there were a lot of intangibles that weren't anticipated, and really just frankly a bandwidth issue. I don't have a director of business development. I don't have a director of admissions, and a room full of people picking up the phone.
You got it. Like you would need a budget such that you could support 2 or 3 other positions, probably at least, right? And, marketing and
with
program director,
and with the experience that we've had over the past couple of years, we probably could get away with at least a slow growth with hiring one person. We just had a dynamic range of skills. But right now, like our program director, Ty Kalenic, and myself are doing 8 people's jobs.
Yeah, your attention is elsewhere.
Yep. Yeah. So I can save the time it would cost to fly out of Charlotte to go to Malibu and play in a lovely fundraising golf tournament and then have 15-minute coffee sessions with people. I can take that time, that energy, and those finances, and I can put them towards subsidizing a cohort for 10 students in the community where I live.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I always thought what you had cooking there was a great idea, and what you have, I think, it sounds like, given the right circumstances, that that model is still ready to go. I think it was a great idea, and you and I shared the one client, Cedar shared it with you, and I think by all measures knocked it out of the park. That I think that client would, if they were here today, would attest to that.
Sure.
So it felt good, and there was a lot that I thought was unique and answered at least some of the holes or weaknesses that I see in the wilderness therapy industry.
Yeah.
So
I appreciate that.
Maybe it'll come back at some point, huh?
I think we've got some stuff lined up over the ending months of 2024 that I believe will position us to explore bringing on the amount of people that could appropriately market and share and raise awareness to that program.
Yeah.
It really just became like, how can I show up for the team that is working with these kids and some of the veterans we work with in the community, like to fully support them in that engagement? And the answer was I couldn't if I was also trying to go to all of these conferences.
Yeah. I mean, from my limited perspective, it seemed like you were spending a lot of time and probably money, trying to, focusing on that.
It was exhausting.
Yeah.
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 And it's still, I mean, to do the outreach and to raise the awareness and to continue to workshop how to make this, especially these high school interventions, like as productive and efficient as possible. um, I would submit as an equal amount of bandwidth,
Yeah.
but I'm also not driving 2 hours to Charlotte and then sitting on a plane for 6 hours to go across the country, right?
Yeah.
Like, and I get to stay at home instead of paying for a hotel room. So,
Yeah.
it's different challenges. It's
Yeah.
still challenges, but it's
For
different
sure.
challenges, and it feels better, frankly, to not leave this a small collection of zip codes to put forth this effort, right? Like I
Yeah.
can drive, like after this, I'm driving a bunch of our mountain bikes over to another community integrated program.
Yeah.
I mean, it's something I wouldn't have even had time to create an MOU for and deliver these bikes if I was constantly still trying to, be on the NatSap tour or
Yes.
whatever. So like
Yeah.
I can stay regional. I will go wherever I need to go for conferences that are based in diversion and prevention work and things that are like acutely relevant to the work that we're doing.
Yeah.
I just I we don't have the bandwidth, we don't have the scale to do the fishing expedition that I very aggressively attempted to do over the course of probably like 18 months.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It sounds like there's, among other things, there's just more like immediate payoff for your effort. Like you can, it's more concrete. Like, oh, I can, versus, marketing for this young adult program, and you're flying across country and playing in golf events and
Which sounds
schmoozing.
terrible, but yeah, it's part of it. Yeah.
But I guess I think of my own experience. Sometimes there's like this immediate, you get in front of someone and like, oh, I've got someone for you.
Yeah.
But it's rare. Like part of like how I see that kind of marketing is you're just staying on someone's radar. Like you're just, there's pivot point. Like, and rarely is it this like immediate, like, oh, I'm going to send someone, I got, next month, I've got someone
Sure.
for you.
Yeah.
I mean, like I said, it occasionally happens, but I see it as more of just like staying relevant, staying on people's radar, because, I think in the consultant world, and maybe some consultants wouldn't like to hear me say this, but some of it is just like staying, they remember you. Like, they think of, oh, in the top 3 of young adult transition programs, oh, Red Cedar transitions. Because I saw John last month at such and such.
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
that.
I mean, it's some combination. My observation is informed with less reps, right?
Sure.
Than you.
Yeah.
And my observation is it's some combination of buckshot and getting your reps in.
Yeah.
Right. Like, so like I need to find a way to either make the Ferris wheel go around faster, right? Or to get multiple seats
Yes.
to get on multiple horses.
I love
on the
that
Ferris
metaphor.
wheel.
Yeah, that's
so,
right.
So, and the first 2 cohorts that we ran, albeit tiny and not at our, projections by any stretch, happened for that very reason.
Yep.
And then I mean, there is a reason that I also learned over those almost 2 years that there are people who have very specific roles where like that's what they do. And
Yes.
the I was doing it was like an Instagram live. It wasn't a podcast, but there was a conversation I had with someone from an entrepreneurial lens, and it was like the fact that like resource aptitude, skill set, and quality of program like aren't, in my experience, so there's a lens and a bias there, but aren't sufficient for successful program development.
You
right?
got
Like,
it right.
There's a lot of intangibles. There's a decent amount of luck, and I think to your point about staying relevant in front of any referral source, people have, maybe it's always been like this, but people have some opinion about their personal experience going through some type of a program. And here's all the ways I would do it different. And if I have the resources and the means and the gumption and the nerve to put it out there, then I'm going to do so. Maybe because I think I can make money, maybe because I think I can help people, maybe because of both or anything in between. But as a result of that, I mean, I don't know. I don't envy anyone who's making those decisions, who, if they are gatekeepers to the families, whatever the accuracy of that is, I don't know how you stay up to date with any of this nonsense.
Yeah.
And some of it, frankly, is nonsense.
Yes.
Like there are people offering services where it's like, I was joking about that this morning. Like, I've had 3, maybe 4 experiences in the last 5 years that I'm fairly certain I learned something from. And because there isn't really, I mean, there's the International Federation of Coaching,
Right.
which is for
ICF.
$300 I can be a coach.
Yeah.
I also can just call myself a coach.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest with you in full disclosure and transparency. I say that we do experiential coaching, and our team
Makes sense to
are
me.
getting their masters in social work or have their masters in social work or are their occupational therapists or licensed clinicians, though that's not the work that we do. I don't know that they all went to a traditional focused like I did. I went to Nature Connected coaching
Yeah,
through
that's
the
right.
Earth
That's
Based
right.
Institute.
Yeah.
It informed our curriculum.
Yeah. Right.
Um, but I'm not aware of, nor do we require at the moment for any of our direct care staff to have a formalized, exclusive, and focused coaching
Certification. Yeah.
certification. We do all of the modalities that we can and that are applicable to that work:
Mm-hmm.
motivational interviewing, nonviolent communication, meaning making, like facilitation training on a regular basis. But I can come up with a catchy name, which I think we did. I can try and share, and this isn't necessarily faulting anyone who does this, because I think this is the birthplace of innovation and creation. Like, I had a tangible experience doing X, Y, and Z. Here, over the years of processing and unpacking, or maybe months, I've concluded that there are some fundamental elements of my experience that are applicable to all, that I can cast a wider net with, and therefore perhaps share some access point to a similar, not mine, but a similar transformative experience. And it costs what in North Carolina? $200 to get an LLC, like to
Yeah.
get registered in the state, and then $100 every year to keep it going.
Yeah.
I got a program,
Yeah.
and then hopefully over the course of years and trying to get those reps in and staying relevant, you become hopefully quite quickly aware of all the insurance coverage and training and skill set that is required to be ethical and responsible and risk averse.
Yeah.
You get crystal clear on who is and is not appropriate for your program.
Yeah.
And you bite the bullet and acknowledge that those who are not necessarily good for yours, you need to refer to other people who are ethically and morally and effective in their delivery models.
Good programs do those things, right?
Sure.
You're right. Yes.
I would
That's the
hope.
I would
I
hope.
mean, and I think
Yeah.
to your point of an earlier question, like, because we're very clear what we are not. We're not crisis. We're not primary care. We also, largely because we've worked for years with a government, albeit a small municipality,
Yeah.
like, we're really good at jumping through hoops and paperwork and really good at communication. So we can work with great synergy with a professional who, like, here's our lane. Your lane is not our lane.
Mm-hmm.
And we've done it. We've shared clients and
Mm-hmm.
worked in great concert at the
Mm-hmm.
support of an individual we're both serving in our own ways, as well as their family.
Yeah.
So, I think that's some of it too, of where the stalling happened in our program. I think I came in with a naive perception that networking was the desire to find the most appropriate and suitable service for a participant and a client. And I haven't observed that to be true. Again, I think that's also informed by my ego and my bias and the admitted lack of sustainability of the program we're talking about.
Yep.
But I also don't think it's true. I think they're closed loops. I think there's an element of a secret handshake. I think I've learned some of those handshakes. I think there's a lot of timing and luck as well. And, I can't afford to have everybody, when there's a regional conference here, to go out on my boat and, and do this, that, and the other.
Wine and dine everyone.
And if I could, I'd like to think that I wouldn't, because I'd rather put that money towards a cohort for my prevention program.
Sure.
And I think it would taste a lie to say that I wouldn't. I think if I was in a position to do both,
you would.
I would. But
yeah.
But those seem to be some of the touches that have a very productive return on investment. And at the end of the day, in addition to helping people, this is also a way in which I pay rent.
Yeah.
And for my own healthcare,
mm-hmm.
and for my phone and my car. So, like, it's tricky to be in any industry, not necessarily, from my own experience, believing that money is real, while everyone else on the planet is pretty sure that it is.
Yeah.
And I've said, when things have gotten challenging in Pivot Point's evolution, like, I really wish this wasn't fucking working.
Yeah.
Because if it wasn't working, it would be easy to be kind of like with the young adult program, be like, oh man, like, I really thought we had addressed a lot of the needs of a bunch of families in this country. let
Yep.
alone community, immediate community.
Yep.
There's stuff that I'm seeing as feedback that shows me that I was wrong in a lot of ways, and there's also stuff that I still can't see, but kind of helps me to draw the conclusion that, at least timing wise, if nothing else, this wasn't the right time for this program, right?
Yep.
Um, I think when I created the name Pivot Point, I didn't know at the time just how accurate and effective and like on the nose it was for the name of a organization, right? Like,
Yeah. Right.
became a nonprofit around an election year, financial crisis, and a global
Pandemic. Yeah.
pandemic,
Yeah.
excuse me. Which, when you get the list of when not to start a nonprofit, those are the three things.
That's it.
Like, pump the brakes if
Yeah.
any one of these three,
Right.
and we hit all three.
Right.
I remember in 2020, I'm sure you had similar conversations, being like, with our program director at the time, what are we going to do? It's like, I don't know. We kind of fall under North Carolina ambulatory healthcare protocol, so there's that. So we're
Right.
good there. Here's what we'll do with sanitation and wearing masks. And like, I mean, what's the worst that could happen? It's not like they're going to shut down the woods.
Yeah.
And then a week later, they did that.
They did.
And like, I didn't know you could close outside,
Right.
but it happened.
Yes.
So, and had it not happened, had we not stayed open and curious about what we might be able to do next, which is like the tenet of any intervention we do with any of our clients, I don't think it would have occurred to us to start making some phone calls to smaller organizations, which led to a program called Guard Your Growth in 2020, like the first summer of things getting shut down, which was the curriculum that was the foundation of everything that we do now: the diversion program, the prevention program, the young adult 6-week curriculum. And it was the basis of putting us on the track, albeit not a fast track, tiny program, but putting us on track to be in the final steps of getting nationally accredited by the Association of Experiential Education.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it could have been. I mean, there's a degree of grit and resilience, and I don't know if it's tenacity. It could just be stubbornness. It's probably stubbornness. But there was this perfect unfolding of events that, for whatever reason, in the moment, I was like, nah, man. I mean, even when I was doing everything and just working with halfway houses like every Sunday and every other Saturday, I wasn't sure what I was doing or why it was working, but I was having access to scenarios and growth opportunities for clients that I was working with that their case managers didn't have.
That's right.
And I didn't know about this wilderness stuff. I just was experiencing.
You had the experience. Yeah, every Sunday.
So I got real curious.
Right.
And then thankfully, in that curiosity, there was this other part that was like, I don't know what's happening, and it's fascinating, so that interests me. So like, I'm all in there. But there was also like, don't fuck this up. Like if you have access to stuff that other professionals who are dedicated to finding this stuff aren't, there's got to be some reverence there. Like, you have to hold this with some care and compassion.
Yeah.
And so here's this training. Here's this training.
Yeah.
Here's this training. That's how it started.
Yeah. That's when you did your coaching, started your coaching training?
That's what, yeah. I mean, there was a fast track to what is now a CADC, Certified Alcohol and Drug Counselor.
Yeah,
so
right.
that I got fast tracked. I think I passed the test and had all my hours signed off in less than 9 months about that. And then very early on came across someone who had a different credential from this Earth-Based Institute, which was founded by Michael Josby, who's a Naropa University graduate. And it is this nature-connected coaching, meaning-making, delineation from an Apache scout, like this really powerful, like just sacred. What are you seeing? What does that mean to you? What is it teaching you? Like, you are the you're the expert in this. You, the client, are the expert.
Yeah.
So how can we help cultivate curiosity and a sense of safety so that you're willing to either see what comes up or just admit and own that you don't know yet, right? So and just kind of stumbled into that. A curriculum, a program, bringing people in from all over the world that was a formalized curriculum of what, for the previous, whatever, year and a half, 2 years, I was kind of, sort of,
you were
doing.
in the ballpark. Yeah.
Yeah, I was adjacent.
Yeah. You. Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned early on in this conversation when we were talking, when I asked you that question about where you do this, and typically it's outside someplace.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and yeah, I think you mentioned whether it's on the mountain bike or on the trail, or at the crag, the rock climb.
Yeah.
Uh, and I think you're alluding to it, but like, why those things? Like, why outside? What's the power of nature, or what's the power of those particular experiences? I know we could probably talk for another few hours on that, but I want to get your thoughts on the whys of
Why
nature.
nature?
Yeah.
So, on a very personal level, very subjectively, I was when I moved to Asheville. I was in sort of the next. I was in step phase two of my own recovery journey, and was pretty bought into that process. Was in no way bought into living in a halfway house or a sober home and any of that process. I mean, it was. I still believe is a wonderful program. It still exists, still around. It's a lot more robust than it was when I was there. Um, but I had a lot of unprocessed guilt and shame about the fact that I was there.
Yeah.
And therefore, I hated it and it sucked.
I remember you were saying that you did it because that's what you thought you should do, or people around you thought you
Because I
should
couldn't
do.
go back to Boston.
Yeah.
Boston made that very clear.
You're right.
I didn't
That's
have a
right.
couch or a floor to sleep on.
Yeah.
Um,
But you did it begrudgingly, appropriate. Like,
begrudgingly,
or part of it was like you just
lazily.
wanted to not be there. So you did anything that you could to be outside
All the time, right?
all the time.
So like
Yeah.
we had certain I attend a 12-step abstinence based meetings through the program that I engage in. So I would go to those meetings as often as possible,
Right.
go as early as I could, stay as
Stay
late
as
as
late
my
as you
curfew
could.
would let.
Yeah.
And then every Sunday at this program, which I eventually got to do the Sunday programming for as a contractor, they would take, if you were around, they would take you hiking.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, I can think of a number now. I at the time couldn't wrap my head around any of them. I didn't consider myself a resident in a halfway house or a sober home for the 6 hours or whatever that I was hiking. Maybe in the van to and from the trailhead, right? Because I was still in a minivan.
Yeah.
But while hiking, I was hiking with people who I didn't really know that well, probably wouldn't have picked to go hiking with otherwise. Also didn't really know any better because the people who I probably at that time still wanted to pick to go hiking with were probably getting drunk and high up in New England. But that recharged me. I could get from Sunday to Sunday. I could tolerate with a slowly degrading degree from Monday to Saturday evening,
Yep.
the following week, based off of the one charge of going hiking on Sunday.
Gotcha.
And the person who led those hikes for me when I was a resident had a background in teaching, was a pretty cool dude. Did some engaging kind of meaning making intentional group activities, but mostly we were just hiking.
Yeah.
And it's similar to what I was talking about with giving these kids in the prevention program permission to be kids. Like, we just went hiking.
That's it. We're gonna go walk in the woods.
And there wasn't. I didn't give a thought to how many meetings did I hit. Did I call my sponsor? Did I do my chore? When is my curfew? I was just hiking.
Yep.
And I didn't have to worry about that other shit because somebody else was driving me.
Yeah.
I didn't need to know where we were going.
Yeah.
I don't know where this trust came from. Maybe because I was just so happy to not be thinking about living in a halfway house at the time. But like, Adam said, we turn left at the rock, so we'll turn left at the rock. And then, oh shit, there's, Twin Falls. There's two 100+ foot waterfalls in the middle of the forest. This doesn't make any sense, but this is beautiful. Holy shit, I can go behind one of them? You got to be kidding me. And there was this return to wonder and amazement and like magic. That was my introduction to the woods. I mean, up north, I would go on climbing trips, rafting trips, just camping trips, all the time.
Yeah.
But I did it so that I could, back at the campsite, crack into the case of wine or whatever else was going on. Like,
you earned it that day, right?
Yeah,
by hiking or whatever
camping, or would like go and help set up the tent. And no, you guys go ahead and climb that V6. I'm just gonna hang back at the and then suddenly where's all the booze,
Yeah,
right?
right, right.
It was originally an access point for me to get messed up.
Gotcha.
And then down here it became an access point for me to kind of feel okay with wherever the heck I found myself in my life.
Yeah.
I think that's the primary reason why nature.
Well, you mentioned, I think, wonder, amazement, and there was one other descriptor. Um, yeah, there's something. There's something. It's kind of hard to categorize about having that experience, right? Like
It's
there's something.
bewildering
Yeah,
with especially I would submit, especially without somebody front loading that it's about to happen.
yeah,
Like
right.
it was pulled from my own awareness and reflection of the experience I was having in the moment. It wasn't, hey, we're going to go on a hike, we're going to cross the creek 7 times, and which is a little more, I think, adventure therapy. Like, here's the intention of each creek crossing, and here's what we're going to
Yeah,
take away. And
right.
it was just open, fair game, organic meaning making,
Yep,
without even the invitation to make meaning.
that's right. Completely, which is completely authentic. There's like no, you're not being fed some preconception of what you might feel or what not might even see. Like we're
Yeah,
just going to walk and you see what you see and you have your experience. There's something like
pure.
deeply authentic and pure about that versus this overly curated.
Yeah,
Uh, you know, I
I,
think there's some value to that curation, but
absolutely.
I like what you're talking about.
I absolutely think there's value to that, and to front loading. I
Yeah,
think there's a degree of comfort and stability and grounding that comes from that process in and of itself.
yeah,
And I think it's a bit of a dance to answer the question of why, for me and pivot point nature, because I just felt like Matt
yeah,
for the first time, and based on where I'd come from for the 2 decades prior to that, probably for the first time in quite some time,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
So I think that there's, like what's the nature fix? You think about like books
yeah,
like that and the science of awe, and like, well, we are nature. I remember learning at Earth Based Institute, because they would train you to do this coaching, but then it would all be online for
yeah.
the most part. Like, if you have clients in person, awesome, but like, you can do this with people all over the world, and it's like, this is nature based connecting coaching, and I'm
And
on a
I'm
Zoom.
right.
And I remember Michael so matter of factly just looking at us like bewildered and being like, but you're nature.
Right.
Like, you're not other than nature.
Right.
So like, it
That's a
becomes
great
this return to
great
this
point.
remembering.
Yeah.
It's not me, Matt, human, which somehow is
Which is
not
somehow
nature,
separate from nature.
transplanted into. No,
Right.
it's a reconnection.
Yeah. Yeah. The why of nature, many books have been written about, and I love revisiting that on my own and in conversation whenever it comes up because it's just fascinating to me. And enough of my history to know that it's always, well, since a teenager, it's been a central role in my life and who I am and how I got to be doing what I'm doing. Um, I think the other thing, when you were talking about the whys for you, I think the other thing for me that came up, one of the things I was thinking about was authenticity and just being authentic. I think there's something that nature invites a certain realness with ourselves that
Oh,
is
because
hard to
nature
come
doesn't
by.
give a shit.
That's right. There's
That's the best part of it, man. Like, we'd
yeah,
go down section 9 with a buddy boat, and it's like, look, I get it. Homeboy's eating your Captain Crunch. Somebody else isn't cleaning the lint filter in the dryer, and like, you burned all your clothes, or like you put in something that melted half, and like, you're pissed, and I get it. But if we don't reprioritize, section 9 does not give a shit about your Captain
that's
Crunch. We're gonna
right.
hit that rock, and we're gonna go for a swim,
Yeah,
which is fine, and we get to learn more, and there's probably going to be a lot of valuable conversations as a result of it. But like, nature doesn't care.
yeah,
And like, it's so valuable to know that, like, I mean, our tagline at first was have an experience.
yeah,
Just engage in your experience, like
yeah,
you were talking about.
yeah,
It's not, here's what we're going to do and here's what we're going to get out of it, because that invites this bullshit conception of failure or coming up short, right? Here's the beacon that we're going to aim towards. We're going to aim towards feeling grounded, feeling connected to our present moment experience, and then maybe have a fun exercise or 5 of trying to extrapolate meaning.
yeah,
Like, how can I take this with me? Because I'm not going to be on section 9 for the rest of my life.
yeah,
I'm only here for a couple of hours.
yeah,
but how can I make this applicable moving forward?
Yep.
And that's not by doing X, Y, and Z, turn to your, your books to page 37.
Yeah.
That's like, John, how do you take this with you? You're never going to go on a river again.
Well, we this is another topic we could talk about for hours, but I mean, to me, I always call that the $1,000,000, at this point, probably $1 billion
Well,
question.
inflation, yeah.
Yeah. How to take these experiences that we have in the woods, for example, that can be had elsewhere. But the woods I think are a great forum for these experiences, where we have these. They've been just called state experiences, like this elevated state, or we've got insight into ourselves. But how do we take these experiences that at least can be specific to this context,
Right.
and have them translate in a way that informs us in a different context, going from the woods back to the sober house, or back to mom and dad's house, or back to college. Maybe we can revisit that one.
I mean,
But
it's
a
really
huge
cool
question.
because you think about like, well, why does everyone want to have like sit by the river? Like, why is that such a calming sit spot? Or why is the waterfall? And like, there's some science about the ionic charge of water being
Yeah.
reversed with moving water,
Right.
and it creates a positive ionic charge. And like, if I'm 70% water and I'm near moving water, then I'm literally more positive when I'm near moving water. Well, that's great, but like, I'm not going to drive 2 hours and hike 4 miles to get to moving water if I need to self-regulate. So
Yeah.
then it becomes curiosity,
Yeah.
which becomes central to what we do. Well, where do you feel calm?
Mm-hmm.
Because then there's this mindfulness element of like, well, you can picture the moving water and your body will respond on a cellular level to the memory of the experience of being physically there.
Mm-hmm.
And if that's true, then there's an invitation to be able to at least incrementally self-regulate when I'm not 30 miles away and in the middle of the woods looking at 2 giant waterfalls.
Yep.
Because I have that, if with curiosity and intention, maybe front loading.
Mm-hmm.
I have a facilitator who's like, where do you feel calm right now? Like, let's just notice our shoulders. Are they kind of down and back a little bit more? Is our jaw unclenched? Is there tightness around our eyes anymore? That's cool. I wonder if we can just kind of imprint that on our experience. And like, I might text you Tuesday, it being Saturday, and just text like, hey, is your jaw unclenched?
Mm-hmm.
And we get our reps in.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like any other muscle. I
Mm-hmm.
texted you earlier if you had a dictionary, because I'm trying to think of this evolution or delineation between like, awareness, intelligence, and wisdom.
Mm.
And we're trying to cultivate wisdom. Well, wisdom, the gap, awareness is sort of the observation, I think, of what it is that I could acquire as knowledge. Intelligence is the capacity to acquire knowledge, but wisdom only exists through experience. It's the capacity, almost retroactive, reflective capacity to experience the wisdom acquired or the intelligence acquired.
Mm-hmm.
So without the doing, we can have great conversations like this about all the stuff and the things, but it still becomes a book club. And I hate book clubs.
The doing is essential.
You gotta do.
You gotta
do. You gotta fall on your face. You gotta dig the dirt out from under your nails.
Yeah.
And if we do so with support and in a group setting, for our work and for my experience, like there's this kicking it up a level from, well, the dopamine release of summiting that or working out that hard boulder problem. Like, that's great, especially for people who are quite fond of the dopamine release in their brain. Like, that feels great, but I don't know, oxytocin is a better hit, and that happens in connection. That happens with connectivity and a degree of mutually respectful intimacy that happens in a group setting, however big the group might be.
Mm-hmm.
And if we can continue to tap into that and get our reps in for cultivating a high beyond any of these pharmaceutical type highs, then we can start maybe slowly cultivating purpose and personal agency towards that purpose. And then any of the experiences we have, whether they're in the middle of the woods or the wilderness, they're intrinsic and they become portable and applicable at all times.
Mm-hmm. I like the way you think about that. Yeah, there's a lot in there that I think is really spot on, and I'm gonna keep chewing on that. I've got one last question.
Cool.
Um, so I think we've got at least a decent idea of what you're up to now.
Sure.
Is how there's a few questions I'll throw at you.
Okay.
Take your pick. How is this where you see yourself in 5 years? Does this feel like this is like the long haul for you? Like when you think of your, I would say
Like
mainly
personally or
professional
professionally?
life. Like, is this you're in the sweet spot and you want to stay right here? Like, where do you see yourself in a year, 5 years, 10 years?
10 years, no idea.
No idea. Yep.
5 years. So there is the beacon is to be able to become, uh, and prevention is a trending word, right? Like it has traction from, I'm a nonprofit, so I'm
Yeah.
seeking funding and things like that. And it's a strong hashtag,
Yep.
right? And I think like medically speaking, mental health in the mental health world, it certainly has a lot of validity. And I mean, really, at the end of the day, our after school stuff is leadership programming, because leadership skills are, if we cultivate early enough for those who might be at risk of going in a challenging direction, it's prevention work. So in 5 years, I'd like there to be one cohort Monday through Thursday after school for eighth graders and high schoolers. I think that we have an opportunity to create a mentorship program from eighth grade progressing through high school after school programming. I think that Pivot Point is in a position with continued collaboration to not only continue to diversify who has access to the experiential world, because that's a particularly white field,
Mm-hmm.
but I think through the work that we're doing in subsidizing and supporting marginalized communities to the degree that we can, we have an opportunity to connect through community colleges in our area. There's a lot of outdoor leadership master's programs in our area, and we could have play a role in diversifying the service provider environment
Yeah.
in mental health and behavioral health. So then, in addition to trainings in DEI and cultural alignment and attunement, that can just be cultural alignment and attunement.
Yeah. Right.
I think that that's like the next mountain top that I'm I guess training for right now.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I've also, like, with every passing week, month, year, have gotten incrementally more comfortable with just the tenets of the program. We learn by doing, transformation through relationship, engage in your own experience. And one of the offset kind of ripple impacts of that is that if I can maintain curiosity, if I can continue to hold myself accountable and operate with authenticity and integrity, man, I could see myself opening an ice cream shop and being just as content.
Yeah. Because it's hitting those same core values.
That's
It's
it.
scratching the same itch.
That's
Yeah.
it. This was my first access point into, like, I bet I could do something.
Mm-hmm.
And challenges and speed bumps and hiccups aside, plenty of endless learning opportunities. But like, even with those challenges, it's working.
Yeah.
Right. So like, and I don't know, I challenge anyone to know more about ice cream than me. So like,
Quite
imagine
the
what
connoisseur, are you?
imagine what I could do in an ice cream shop.
Right.
You know?
Right.
So, but yeah, 10 years out, who the hell knows?
Yeah.
Maybe that's the ice cream shop.
Yeah. Right. 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 I think I would have a similar answer to the 10 year out thing. Yeah. Well, I think we came real close to hitting our mark of an hour.
Sweet.
I appreciate the conversation.
Yeah.
I think, like I've told you before, I think many of the people that I interview, it's like, oh yeah, we could keep talking about A, B, C, D. So my hope is that this is one of many conversations in the future.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's fun.
Oh yeah, I appreciate it.
Cool.
Thanks.
Yeah.